Hey gang, Coach Bill. Wanted to drop in today real quickly. Let's talk a little bit about the lead arm lock. Okay, so I had a question that sort of went along after we looked at some of the lead arm lock, when we looked at Acuna and Tatis and Babe Ruth and such. And I had a comment that said, hey, you know what? We started looking and absolutely we see that. So why is it that the lead arm lock is not taught at younger levels? Okay, so I would begin with the overarching 30,000 foot story, okay? Looking down on what we're seeing and what's happening, okay? And a lot of times there is an item out there in the world of psychology, and it is known as the power of the first story. And typically the power of the first story states that the very first thing we ever hear is what we are going to be drawn to. Okay, whether or not any of the subsequent information is dictating that is not true, there is still a monumental obstacle to overcome that idea, the power of that first story. And so what happens is, especially with younger players, or they could even be older players that actually have had some success, what we're referring to is this lead arm locking, and instead of utilizing the middle to its extent, what will happen is they'll start to throw their hands. So they're throwing their hands, they're dumping the barrel. Any of these phrases that you hear, that is known as casting, okay? Well, for some people, that's all they need to see is the lead arm, and it's considered casting. And yet we have just looked at maybe 9, 10, 11 videos, and I don't care, go to anybody that you want to at those levels, and you're going to see that when they are at their best, or at some point on any particular pitch, you're going to see hitters drive to lead arm extension. Right? They're going to drive to the lead arm extension so that we're working on keeping that barrel inside the ball. And so what happens is at youth levels, a lot of hitters aren't, they've been coached into something, right? Rather than just left to develop, and we would probably see more of this, of a scissor style kick, right? So as they're swinging, we'll see something along those lines. But they're being taught how to see the ball, hit the ball, do this, do that, all sorts of commands. And so what happens, we see a lot of hands. So we get real handsy, and a lot of youth players will look like this, okay, which makes them very susceptible to particular parts of the plate on particular pitches. Typically inside fastballs and away off-speed pitches become really difficult to hit, okay? So again, what they hear, right? And that's casting, and we have to get away from it. And yet, when we talk about limiting the amount of absorption, and we're talking about guys hitting the hardest balls that they can hit, they all arrive, let me measure up to that, they all arrive at the ball in this particular fashion, okay? Doesn't mean you can't hit, okay? Doesn't mean you can't hit with a bent up lead elbow and such, but we always have to keep in mind that when we're looking at some of these videos, these are some pretty big kids. They are the elites, okay? So if I come in and I'm a 5'10", 165-pounder, and I get caught up on the inside and I look like this, hopefully I can get a double out of it. I'm probably not hitting the ball out of the ballpark, okay? But in all likelihood, I'm probably ending up as a fly out, okay? And right, so that's a different story for a different day, where we look at average distances of home runs by these hitters compared to what their furthest is, okay? And then we'll see that a lot of the times they're only around 75% of their capacity, okay? And again, I would rather train the adapting of my game plan rather than the adapting of my so-called mechanics or my physical swing. So why don't we, long story short, why don't we teach it at a younger age? It should be taught at a younger age, okay? We don't, because it has stuck with us, this idea that it's called casting. And, a lot of times we're not biomechanists. We're not in kinesiologies. We're not professional instructors. And so we're just moving along hand-me-down information. Okay, so we have to be very leery of how we cue our players. Okay, so that's another story for another day. But hopefully that answered your question. And hey, look forward to seeing you back here next time.